Cool, it works. So we're going to continue this conversation a little bit, and there's been a lot of talk about the metaverse, and there's been a lot of talk about Facebook and technology companies, and where they stand. And I know you guys are all, I'm assuming a lot of us are in the business of VR and virtual reality, and thinking about the metaverse and how does it all play out for us, and we're mostly focused on the positive aspects, right? We're thinking about all the amazing, great things that we're going to do with this technology, with XR technology. And what I'm going to ask you today to do is maybe take a walk into the shadow side with me, and let's talk about the other side of that. Let's talk about the paradox of what else is happening and what else might be happening, because if we're not aware of it, it's almost assured to happen. And all of a sudden, what do they say? The thing that enables evil is for good people to do nothing, something like that. And so I want you to imagine virtual reality as a drug. And it's being used as a drug in a lot of amazing ways, right? It's being used to treat anxiety and depression. It's being used to ease elderly as they move into their dying phases in hospice, which is really amazing. It's being used to help people cure their phobias, like fear of heights or fear of spiders if you lived in Australia for 18 months, or fear of public speaking maybe, which I've never had. It's being used for soldiers coming back from war to treat PTSD, which is amazing. It's being used to help treat phantom limb pain in amputees. In America, at least, it's being used to train teachers and workers on how to deal with active shooter situations to try to save lives. It's being used to teach people how to cook chicken. And if you eat too much chicken, you can actually use it to exercise, to lose weight, and feel better about yourself. A couple of years ago in Paris, Kylie and I got to go into the Great Pyramids of Egypt from France in virtual reality. And it was amazing. And it's an experience you just cannot have. It's being used, the new Vive Flow is being used to increase consciousness on the planet and helping people become more mindful and meditate and have amazing reflective experiences. And it's being used as a party drug to a certain extent. And it's being used to pull communities together, like virtual Black Rock City, in Burning Man, in festivals. And as we just talked about, it's being used to become better and have these amazing sexual experiences that we might not be willing to have or able to have in real life. And there's a downside to all of these great things as well, right? And this drug is kind of being pushed in a way. There's tens of billions of dollars. I think Facebook just came out recently and said they're going to spend $10 billion themselves on virtual reality in the next several years, promoting it. $10 billion, one company. And it's being put into places you'd never see drugs, right? There's drug-free zones. There's no virtual reality-free zones. It's being given to kids in schools. It's being given in the workplace and help train factory workers and helping, efficiency in all kinds of workplace. It's being given to our military to make them more efficient killing machines. It doesn't take pills, it doesn't take liquid. They beam it right into our eye, which means it's going to get smaller and lighter and more accessible. The price is getting cheaper, $2.99, all you can eat, right? And it's going to be everywhere. And I think that's inevitable because there are so many good things happening with it and so many forces behind it. 5 years ago, I would talk about virtual reality and people would roll their eyes and say it's never going to happen. We've been here before. And now I think people are starting to understand that it's here to stay and it's going to keep growing. And it's been around for a long time. People think, it's all of a sudden, this is the first stereoscope from the mid-1800s. And in 1936 at the World's Fair, the Viewmaster came out, and I had one of these when I was a kid, and so we've always had this fascination with these 3D environments and wanting to be immersed in places that we couldn't actually go, right? And then in the 50s, We had the Sensorama, which was the first device that added haptic effects, right? So wind and smell and vibration to simulate like motorcycle riding and stuff like that. And then obviously we had the Sword of Damocles, which got smaller and lighter, and then the 80s, Jaron Gabor created the whole, or Jaron Lanier created the term virtual reality, and he had the first iPhone, which was EYE phone. Too bad he didn't trademark that. And the data glove. And while all of that was going on, I wound up doing this virtual reality startup. For those of you, just a little bit of background, I wasn't virtual reality, it was called LaserStorm. It was the first kind of immersive entertainment that I got into and created this laser tag business that exploded in a good way and then a bad way. And along the way, my biggest customer came to me, Edison Brothers Mall Entertainment, and they acquired a product called Virtuality from a guy named Jonathan Waldron in London, W Industries, and they wanted to bring it to America. And so we built virtual reality and laser tag arcades in malls in the early 90s. And then I got recruited into this startup called Global VR, and we created the first virtual reality arcade game in 1998, 1999 that went on to about 2,000 units. And that was really the first scalable, sustainable virtual reality product. So I've been around virtual reality now for about 30 years and just kind of watching it come and go and watching it come and go. And then after like 2000, it just kind of got really quiet. And what happened is the smartphone revolution took off. And we have Steve Jobs and the iPhone to thank for virtual reality, because what smartphones did was took the core components and drove the price down to nothing through huge volumes, right? So really sharp, high resolution, ultra small, and cheap LCD screens, systems on a chip that could run whole supercomputers now on in your phone, on your headset, really small cameras, right, that now do depth sensing and LiDAR and 3D and photogrammetry in your pocket. Internal inertial measurement units that allow us to measure what angle and what direction we are in space. So all of this stuff was from the smartphone, building hundreds of millions of them, and then this punk kid, Palmer Luckey, saw that and he said, hey, I can make a virtual reality headset, which he did, thank God. And while that was going on, Facebook was walking around saying, we got a problem. Right? So I don't know how many of you read this book, The History of the Future by Blake Harris. If you haven't read it, should be mandatory reading if you're in the virtual reality industry. And what he talked about was how Facebook and Zuckerberg, Mr. Zuckerberg, in case he's watching, was, had an existential crisis going on. He was really concerned that he didn't own the platforms through which he connects to the audience, because that was controlled by Apple and by Google, because it was no longer the web. When Facebook came out, it was basically a browser product, and our use of the web, of the internet, had shifted to devices. Now, Facebook has continued to grow year on year on year to where almost half the planet now is active monthly user on Facebook. In some countries, the Facebook outage that happened recently, people lost access to the internet, because in some countries, Facebook is the internet, which is a scary thing to think about. They've amassed a $58 billion cash hoard and keep printing money quarter after quarter after quarter, right? But that's all at risk, because while people are spending a couple of hours a day on social media on their phones, 80% of it is through their phone. So 80% of the time people are interacting with Facebook is through the mobile phone that they don't control access to, that Facebook doesn't control access to. And so I can just imagine Mark Zuckerberg and his executives sitting around the office saying, what do you want to do tonight, Mark? And Mark says, I want to buy the next computing platform. We have to control this. We have to control our destiny. And so in the meantime, Palmer was raising a couple of $1 million on Kickstarter, the most successful Kickstarter at the time in history. And Mark saw that and he said, that's the next computing platform. I think we can turn this into the next computing platform. And so he said, I'll buy that for $3 billion. And he did. Now, Tim Apple recently, and I think Apple is the greatest marketing company in the history of business, certainly in my lifetime. And like any good marketing company, they're looking at the landscape, they're looking at their competition, and they're saying, what do we need to do differently? How might we reposition our product? And they looked at Google, who's their big Androids, obviously their big competition, and they looked at it and they realized that 80% of their advertising comes from, 80% of their revenue comes from advertising. And there's an adage, right, which is, if you're not paying, you're the product. And so Apple decided to double down on privacy. Now, whether you believe that's marketing positioning or you believe their intention is pure doesn't matter, because this isn't about Apple. This is about what it's doing to Facebook and how it's going to shape the metaverse. And so they started running billboards everywhere around Apple and privacy. And Apple stands for privacy. And every big tech event around the world had these giant billboards about privacy. And then they released this thing called App Tracking Transparency, right? Which meant that everybody on iOS, which, oh, by the way, only has 15% of the market share of the OS globally, but 85% of the revenue and the commerce on mobile comes through iOS. They basically said everybody's going to have to opt in to be tracked. And 60% of the people did, globally. 60% of the people on iOS says, I don't want people tracking me anymore. And all of a sudden, the Financial Times recently said $10 billion was just wiped off of the revenue of the social networks almost overnight. And so the mobile, and what they do, I'm gonna get into the data a little bit. The average person, and think about if you fall into this, spends between 4 and 5 hours, I think it's 4 and 5 hours, 5 to 6 hours, 46% of the population spends 5 to 6 hours a day on their mobile device. 70% is between 3 and 6 hours, right? And it's happening everywhere. Our consumption of media is growing on mobile year over year over year in every country in the world. And so I'm going to pause for a second and just say that for some reason I sent the wrong link to the wrong presentation. And so if I stumble a couple of times, that's why. Netflix, Apple TV, Disney, Fortnite is on mobile. There's all these new gaming streaming services that are coming out on mobile now, right? And so these technology companies are giving us more and more and more reasons beyond just social, right, to be able to spend time on our phone and captivate our attention. And by the way, that 5 to 6 hours was not including work. That's literally not including work time spent on the phone. That's personal time. And now with 5G is going to make instant access to all this stuff with no latency. So you can download a movie in 3.6 seconds. So what's that going to do to the global trends of media consumption and how much time we spend on our phones? Now, the NHS in London, in the UK, says that 1 in 3 people are addicted to something. And that's, I believe, a clinical description of addiction. But the reality is we're all addicted to something. Because addiction is we're addicted to distraction, really is what it is, right? All of these addictions, whether they're chemical addictions, technology addictions, whatever, we'll get into some of those, they're there because we are trying to escape an emotional state. And oftentimes we're not conscious of this, right? We're not conscious of why we want to be distracted. We just know we do. So this is the Sanskrit term for a term called dukkha. Has anybody heard of that? Dukkha is, the best English word for it is suffering. But there really is no word. You need about 10 words to describe what this is. So in the Buddhist term, it's all of the discomfort that we feel as humans, right? It doesn't have to be physical discomfort. It could be frustration with a spouse. It could be having to deal with our parents or our kids or our coworkers. It could be shame associated with something from our childhood. We all experience. This is part of the human condition. And this is what causes us to be attracted to distraction, right? It's all the mental ghosts that are either conscious or often subconscious or even unconscious. And the world's given us a lot of ways to be distracted, right? And the smartphone is the easiest one because it's always there. It's always there. How often are you standing in line for a coffee and you've got a minute or two, and what do? You grab your phone, maybe you go on TikTok, maybe you got 3 notifications you decide to do, maybe you decide to do an email, but what it's doing is it's stealing our ability to stay present with the real world, with life itself. Some of us go to alcohol. You get home from a hard day at work, and I know I fell prey to this for a long time in my life. I get home for a hard day at work, the first thing I did was I'd pour a drink. Sometimes I'd drink a glass of wine, sometimes it would be a bottle of wine, right? This is what I'm still battling, you can tell by my stomach, which is food. Right? Comfort food makes me feel better. It's something about my childhood that I haven't healed yet. Right? We just talked about sex and porn. Porn's a massive addiction for people. It's an easy way to get distracted and turn off reality. Right? How many of you might be addicted to work? You're doing startups, if you're in an early stage business. I know in America this is a huge problem, right? We just work too much and we just throw ourselves, we're distracted, we don't want to deal with it, we just get into work. And what that does is it leads to negative effects. So we get hungover, we gain weight, we don't feel good about ourselves, we get disconnected from our partners and we lose intimacy, we get burned out because of work. And all of those things create a cycle. Right? And so you feel bad, you do these things, you feel bad about them, that adds to more suffering, and then we go back into that addiction cycle, and that's the addiction cycle, right? Now, virtual reality is like the super addictive drug, it's the most addictive thing we've ever created. It's like the weapon of mass distraction, right? So they're using VR at the Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in LA for people who are in post-surgery patients instead of opiates, because it can distract us so powerfully. Our body can't process the pain, the physical pain that we feel, because it overrides all of these receptors. And so if VR can be used in post-surgery patients to distract them from their physical pain, what's going to happen when we start spending more and more and more time in virtual reality? Now, VR has been shown to increase people's concentration level in schools, right? It's been shown to increase people's confidence in learning a foreign language and the ability to speak it. We spend $46 billion a year maintaining old school buildings in America alone. Gartner is forecasting 51% of the knowledge workers are going to work remotely by the end of this year. We waste $700 billion a year in commuting every year. And we spend $800 billion a year in occupancy cost for knowledge workers in America alone. There's almost $2 trillion spent to have people go to an office every day, work, and come back home. And so, if I wanted to put $1 billion, a billion people in virtual reality, how hard is it really going to be when the economic forces are all swimming downstream? Because companies are going to save billions and billions and trillions of dollars over time. Those were annual numbers. Think about that over 10 years, like $7 trillion over 10 years. And so it's inevitable. Virtual reality is going to be everywhere. You can't stop it. The genie's out of the bottle. And so the question then becomes, which pill do you take? Do you take the blue pill and continue to make amazing virtual reality experiences and ignore all the potential risks that are coming? Or are you willing to take the red pill? Because, oh, those are the wrong blue pills, sorry. And the pill, these are the pills, and we just gobble them down by the handful. Right? We're being given them all the time. Now, there was this movie, some of you might remember. Anybody excited about The Matrix 4 coming out in December? I'm so excited. And so where Neo, took the red pill and he awakened from his cocoon and he walked around and he realized that he was a battery. And the machines had enslaved all of humanity to become batteries to feed their machinery. And what Facebook does is they harvest our attention. All of the social networks, they harvest our attention to build the $58 billion worth of profit that they're sitting on in cash, right? And so they keep us enslaved willingly. We are willing slaves, right, to being in this loop of distraction. And so when VR is everywhere, what choices are we going to make? There should be a video there. Oh, I think I hit stop. Can you help me? Oh, there it is. I hate when I do this. So there's some cool avatars. We're going to talk about avatars. There it is.
Working hard, trying to create a photorealistic avatar and animate it in real time from VR. You can see an example here of two of my colleagues working on this problem, communicating with each other in VR, and this is what they would look like when they see each other in VR.
What do you do for exercise?
This is coming out of Facebook Reality Labs, in case you haven't seen it.
And then I do boxing too.
What kind of yoga? Wait, okay, yoga and boxing.
Yeah, there's a nice contrast
Yeah,
there.
okay.
Yeah.
What kind of yoga do you do?
I do hot yoga. I love hot yoga.
I knew it. Oh my god.
Oh my god, I love hot yoga. No. And so that was 2 years ago. That was 2 years ago. So photorealistic avatars, we're on the verge of that, right? So the ability to stay in VR and see people and have virtual telepresence is right around the corner. Now, so if Facebook is trying to get us all in the metaverse, they have $58 billion in cash, they're printing $10 billion of cash a year, they're subsidizing a $700 headset down to $299 so they can give them away like candy to kids in the corner, right? And we all talk about we don't want Facebook to own the metaverse, and whether they own the metaverse or not, it doesn't matter. What is the metaverse? The metaverse is a bunch of online worlds that are connected, but the company that controls our attention is the thing that we have to be aware of. This isn't about technology. This isn't about OpenXR. This is about who do we give our attention to. Now, we know Facebook has been willing to do really shitty things, right? They experimented with 600,000 people, unbeknownst to them, to see if they could manipulate their emotional state. That was in 2014. In 2017, they told advertisers that they could identify kids who were emotionally insecure and with low self-esteem so they could be more vulnerable to advertising messages. Yeah, right? You've probably all heard of the Cambridge Analytica scandal where they went ahead and manipulated the US election, whatever. And then recently, Frances Haugen blew the whistle and showed heaps and heaps and heaps of documents that show that Facebook has always chosen profit over people. And so the question becomes, who do we want pulling the strings in our brains? And this isn't a story as old as time, right? The media has been manipulating us since, I don't know, has anybody seen Mank? The movie Mank on Netflix, which is a story about the screenwriter who wrote the screenplay for, help me? Orson Welles' movie, the Rosebud. Citizen Kane. And it was a great story about how powerful the media was back in California back then and how they were manipulating the election. So the media has always been manipulating us. It's happened since, I'm sure it's been happening for hundreds of years since there was a media. But they've never been as effective. They've never had as effective tools as they've had today. And we're arming them with the most effective tool ever, which is this weapon of mass distraction. And so this is the thing that really scared me. I think this is the video I was looking for.
The world around us is constantly in motion. We need a new kind of map to help navigate this ever-changing landscape. A map like this is about more than just moving through the physical world. It's about enhancing the way we interact with each other and our surroundings. The vision of our Live Maps research is to bridge the physical and virtual divide to bring people closer together. To achieve this, Live Maps uses machine perception to construct multi-layer representations of the world, showing where you are in space, recognizing what things look like, and understanding the intrinsic meaning of objects. Connected devices, like smartphones and AR glasses, will scan the surroundings to create a live dynamic index, amplified by crowdsourced data, allowing the maps to recognize when things have changed and update automatically. Ultimately, our Live Maps research aims to empower people to connect and share in deeper, more meaningful ways. Whether it's improving how we access information, or understanding the context of a situation, to deliver shared experiences through augmented reality, or proactively serving up relevant information in highly personalized ways. Live Maps will one day transform how we all engage with the world, making it feel more immediate, more intuitive, more natural, more human.
Who believes that shit? Right? Like, what wonderful marketing bullshit. And so we all remember Cypher, right? And what was it he said? He said that, I know that this steak isn't real, but the Matrix tells me it's juicy and delicious, and ignorance is bliss. Right? And so we're going to be sold a vision of the future around convenience, around interaction, around telepresence, around connection, around all of these things. But the people who are building those tools are trying to monetize our attention and sell our advertisers, sell our attention to eyeballs to advertisers for profits, or to whoever the highest bidder is. It might not be advertisers. It might be governments. It might be elections. Like, who knows what's going to happen? And the amazing thing to me is we're all doing this willingly. So my invitation is, when the phone rings, just pick it up and get out of the matrix. And think about, while you're building these amazing experiences, don't forget that there's a counterforce out there that's real. Like, this isn't a fucking Hollywood movie. This is our lives. This is real shit that's going on right now. And I just want to ring the alarm bell a little bit and, like, fight for open XR, fight for open standards, fight for a dark metaverse, right? Fight for whatever we have to do to give people options and make them accessible. Yeah, that might be my closing slide, but. So I don't know what else I have here, because these are vestiges of this presentation that I gave in 2019, and there we go. What are you gonna do? So anyway, that's it. Sorry for the anticlimactic ending, but. Questions or comments? I'd like to pass the microphone around. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks very much. Really fascinating talk. I know that one of the things that worries me perhaps the most is the use of the psychological tools that Facebook used to profile people, to understand, like, where they have leverage, basically. Do you think it's possible to use these same tools to create more presence in people? Or do you think they can only really be destructive?
Everything. Yeah, I don't know. Let me grab that back, and maybe somebody else can get this to work. Thanks. If you can pass that back, thanks. Look, I think everything can be used for good and evil. Everything's a paradox. Everything has a shadow and a light side. And so the answer to it is yes, it can be used for both. I think the thing that really scares me around that is how they've now proven. There was a university did a study recently using Oculus Quest, and they found that with the movement tracking, they can identify with high 90% accuracy who you are without actually knowing who you are, based on how you move your head, how you move your hands. And so Facebook's going to be able to track you without knowing who you are. They're going to be able to actually track you to an individual based on your interactions in virtual reality. And so the ability to track you now is going to go infinitesimal. And will that be used to create better presence? Absolutely, because if it's better presence, you're going to get more people using it. And this is the scary part of this. In order for them to do what they have to do to drive profits, the stuff has to be amazing. And it has to be useful, which is why they say they're putting 10,000 employees working on virtual reality and reality labs. And oh, by the way, the whole Meta thing, so they renamed themselves Meta because they knew they couldn't win the game they were playing, right? And when you know you can't win the game you're playing and you have resources, what do? You change the game. And so what the name Meta, everybody thought, oh, it's a smokescreen because we're getting some bad PR and government and blah, 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 blah. No, he went all in on this game. And that's what that change was. It wasn't a smokescreen. It was an indication of where they're headed. I really believe that.
It's working.
Awesome. Any other questions or comments, rants?
I was thinking if it's the whole thing of distracting it's a bit like a magician doing a trick for you, being smarter than you are, and if it's just a distraction, then does the content really matter? I'm not sure.
Yeah, look, I think great content will always draw more of an audience. And, you know, we talked earlier about you put on VR and how you get that time warp, right? You're in it and you lose track of time. We've all done that in computer work, right? Like you're working on a computer and you're in flow, and all of a sudden time flies and it's a couple hours later. VR, it's extremely powerful. And so I think does the content matter? No, because we've all watched shitty TikTok videos for an hour too, right? I mean, so to a certain extent, I think it depends on how much friction there is to get into the content. If it's on our phone and we can just click and doom scroll cat videos, that's really easy. The quality of the content doesn't matter. But I think because VR has such high friction right now, the content has to be amazing, which is why Facebook is buying every single game developer that has a hit game now in virtual reality, right? They just bought Within, which is Chris Milk's company, for $500 million. He was on the verge of bankruptcy 18 months ago when he launched Supernatural. They bought the maker of what's that? Population 1, right? They've bought the maker of Asgard's Wrath. So they're just like, they bought Beat Games, like they're just writing checks because they have all this money and they can't spend it as fast as they're making it. So they're just going to go ahead and acquire as many game developers as possible, because what's the best way to capture the next generation's attention? Turn yourself into the #1 gaming platform. And by the way, if you're tracking the Quest 2 sales numbers versus PS5, you'll know that they're actually tracking really closely. And that's scary. So VR, Quest is going to be the next big gaming platform. That game is over. And so now you're going to have hundreds of millions of kids in VR playing games. So if I were an evil genius trying to take over the world, that would be my first step. And I think he's well on his way.
Thank you.
Sorry, Mark.
Okay, yeah, you talk a lot about Facebook, but I think all people know people don't really like Facebook. We use it as a tools, but for me there is another competitor who is more impressive. It's Apple, because people have a fan base, and Apple is on the way.
Yeah.
I think Apple is more dangerous than Facebook, because when people will release its own metaverse, we'll have many people who will just be fan, and people who are going to teach the good choice of Apple. I think Facebook just released that now because they are, as I say, this is all in for them, because we all know Apple is going to release them in next year. What do you think about the power of Apple compared to the power of Facebook?
Yeah, and there's another player in there that we haven't mentioned yet, which is ByteDance, which is the maker of TikTok, which just bought Pico. And Pico's the #2 selling headset in China, and Facebook can't sell in China. But I just want to go back. Sorry, this is terribly tedious, isn't it? I just want to go back to that slide. So we can talk about how we don't like Facebook, and there's a lot of people that don't like Facebook. Half the planet is using Facebook every single day. And so that's the small minority of people who don't like Facebook. Because for Apple, look, I'm an Apple fanboy. I'm all in on there. So you might be asking the wrong person. I think that if I had to vote with my money on a company that's going to do less harm, it's going to be Apple over Facebook or TikTok or even Google. Because I'm not saying they don't have an advertising business. They don't need an advertising business. And will they add an advertising business? Absolutely. App tracking transparency was boosting their ad revenues dramatically. Like, that's going to happen. That's a business strategy. But I think sometimes we have to make choices of the lesser of evils, and my money goes to Apple for predominantly that reason. Also, their products actually work really well. But I do think they're going to make the market. I do think when Apple makes a market, Facebook for some reason is terrible at advertising. Have you noticed that? like how often do you see ads for the Quest? Like when Apple launches a headset, the world's going to know what virtual reality is, and then they're highly likely to define new user paradigms like they did with the touchscreen, right? They invented the touchscreen paradigms that we all now take for granted with the original iPhone. And, what was it called? Magic Touch or something they called it. And so my guess is they're going to make a great product, which they do, and it'll change the game and it'll drive adoption. But I'm not sure they're going to sell $299 headsets. I think they're going to sell $2,000 headsets initially because they're playing a really long game. It's just a different game. But I would watch TikTok. So the TikTok algorithm is a weapon. Like the US government banned it at one point, or tried to ban it. Now, that's politics. I don't want to get into Trump or any of that shit, right? But it'll just go to show you how powerful that algorithm is. Everybody wanted it. Walmart wanted to buy that algorithm because they knew they could turn it into a shopping channel, right? And so now TikTok bought ByteDance, Chinese company, largest private technology company in the world, bought Pico, which is the #2 selling headset, and they're going to shift to the consumer market. And so now you're going to get to choose between, well, who do you want to have your data? The Chinese government or Mark Zuckerberg? I want Vladimir Putin to release a headset. And then we'd have the perfect triumvirate. So it's a really good question. Really good question. Thank you. Anybody else? Yeah. You can pass it to him when you're done.
Yeah, thanks. I really enjoyed your talk, especially when you said about capturing the attention, and that VR is probably a very good tool for that. But I wanted to have your opinion about something that could almost be called a cognitive violation. I mean, it exists in advertising from the radio for quite some time. I mean, you cannot choose not hear except for plugging your ears or so. And I was wondering what's your vision, or who's going to put the barriers and say this is almost a cognitive violation, and who will stand to kind of protect the consumer when Facebook, as you said, is choosing profit over people?
Test. Oh. That's all right. Is that working? I was going to use an expletive. I think that was the universe telling me not to say fuck. Sorry. I think we're fucked. To be honest with you, I tend to be a very optimistic person. I see the glass half full, 2/3 full. I don't know how we reverse this trend. I think the genie's out of the bottle. And when I look at consumer behavior, customer behavior, human psychology, I don't know how we stop this from happening, which is why I'm talking about it. Because I'm hoping if we get enough people thinking of it, some people will come up with some solutions. I don't know how to stop the trend. I feel like it's inevitable, which is where the Thanos thing came from, right? I was just like, it's inevitable. Yeah. Oh. Test.
It's on mute somewhere. Okay, while they're fixing it, yeah. Thanks for the presentation, also in the insight. I just want to help you to be positive, because for me it's about also how designers and design intents. Just to give you an example, Netflix, when you're binge watching too long, the designers added in stop watching, go out and get some fresh air, right? So I think that part is also part of this community when you design your games or whatever. Also think in the positive way. Even the TikTok algorithm is better than the Facebook one because it doesn't push young girls into bad imaging and so on. So that's also why some of the designers has to be better. The question I had was more related to more also on the communication before. I think humans also now tends to go faster. Consumption is much faster about content. I was just talking to an editor of a big newspaper here in Belgium also. Some people just read the headlines anymore. So it's all these clickbaits. And that's where jumping, so people don't take even the time to go deeper in the content, go deeper on the understanding, and also on virtual reality, it's very fast to go just, damn, oh, I don't like you, go to the next one, right? So those connections become much more, lighter and softer.
Yeah.
So is that, how are we going to fix this? I don't know.
I think it started with MTV. I don't know if you guys, I'm definitely dating myself now, but, they talked about the MTV generation and how, all of a sudden we went to 3-minute music videos and our attention span was shortening. And now it's, now it's gone to clickbait and everything's a race to the click and a race to the bottom. And so I think that's a 40-year trend. And so I think, look, and it's entirely possible that because what VR does is increases our concentration, it's entirely possible that VR technology starts to reverse that trend, because once you're in there, it's possible there could be fewer distractions. It just depends on how VR, how we use VR and how we build these worlds. Are we building distraction into the metaverse? Right? And because what we always do is we take what we know and we build into the new paradigm and then we evolve it over time, my guess is, yes, that's what we're going to do. But I think the technology itself holds the power to hold our attention longer and to start to allow us to concentrate better. And so, again, it probably depends on the application. Yeah, it's a good question. Don't feel on the spot. You don't have to.
I would just suggest we use algorithms maybe for a good purpose.
Yeah.
That if the algorithms are so powerful and they can influence behavior, why not use algorithms to encourage people to spend more time just being present?
Because there's no money in that. Sorry to be a cynic, but
there are philanthropists with loads of money.
Yeah, there are.
But when you say that, it's already influencing people what is good behavior, and if you use an algorithm to deploy a good behavior, you are already influencing people. Is it good to do that?
Yeah, and what's look, I don't actually think Mark Zuckerberg thinks he's doing bad. I think he knows. Yeah, look, I don't know. I question that. I think it's my guess is he's confused by all of what's going on in the world around him. Like, he just doesn't see it. I think that's entirely possible, right? There have been bad players around forever, and from their perspective, they thought they were doing okay. They thought they were doing the right thing, right? Well, who's to judge good or bad, right or wrong? Like, I think that the question is what's happening at a meta level over a long term, and how does human behavior fit into this? And those are the things that are hard to change.
But that's a bad magician. If he doesn't know what the trick is, that's a bad magician, because what's the end goal?
Yeah.
It's just more of the same.
Yeah, does the bad magician actually saw the girl in half? Oh, fuck.
Don't look at this.
Don't look. Sven.
Yeah, so for me, a big possibility is then back coming to content, because you said MTV and then everything is so fast, and I was thinking about the big success of Breaking Bad, which at one episode took so much time to tell nothing fast, and it was a big success because people come back to this, oh, it's nice experience again to watch something that is not fast and fast edited.
Yeah.
And I think this can be also the possibility to, if you create good content that is maybe different, also platforms. And for me, I have a problem with VR chat. It's very free, but it's so fast. It's not conscious. It's not like you. And also this avatar thing. It's too much for me that I can change so fast my avatar. I would really enjoy a platform where I can't be so fast, where I really be forced to be slower, to come down, and not stepping up.
And that comes back to if you're not paying, you're the product, right? And you talked about Netflix building in things where if you're binge watching too much, it says, hey, slow down, because there's no advertising there, right? I mean, they don't care. They don't need you really to watch that 17th episode of Breaking Bad tonight. So where if it's ad driven and clicking, it's all about clicks, because their money comes from that behavior, and the faster you click, the more money they make. It's just a cash register that keeps ringing up, right? And advertising isn't based on how long you stay on a page. Obviously, the Google algorithm factors that in, so there's something there. But I think the subscription services could ultimately be a piece of this puzzle, is we get people to pay. But there's 2.8 billion people on Facebook, and most of them probably can't afford to pay. And that's one of the problems I see. You want to?
But that's the matter of reinventing the business model. Basically, if you multiply the number of users, or if you divide the revenue of the Facebook by number of users, it turns out that they earn probably less than 100 euro per user per year.
Yep.
Then if you can design a model where I can earn 500 euro more using Facebook or any social media in a wise way and consuming less, because you can also bring in like wise consumption into the game and subsidize some of that pay through different mechanisms. Where in Europe there's a lot of things you can structure here. That could be totally, completely different business model, and that has money in the game.
Yeah.
That can change the game.
Yeah, and look, and that's why they need 1 billion people in virtual reality, is because they make, very little on each incremental person, but they need to have scale. And the problem is that they've already started, like they know the game, they have the technology, they have the infrastructure, they have the money, they have the product, they have the momentum, and we're sitting here talking about what if we had a business model. So, that's 10 years old. We're 10 years behind answering that question if we want to catch up. And I encourage people to start asking that question. Like, there's workshops going on here. Where's the workshop on how do we deal with this issue? I think there are governments that have money that are putting money into the arts, and I applaud that. Let's put some money into this. Like, let's start mobilizing our resources, because I actually think our humanness, our humanity is at stake. Like, this is the end game. This is the end game, or it could be. Do you want to pass that back, and then I'll get you.
Different VR meeting like Stereopsia or Laval Virtual. For sometimes there is a lot of talks about ethics in VR. How much impact do you think those talks have on the VR community and in the process of the company when designing their business model, their hardware, their software?
Yeah.
Do you think those talks have an impact, or is just shiny thing to say we care about ethics?
I don't think. Look, I think the question, it's a question of at what altitude are we talking about ethics, right? If we're talking about ethics around user behavior, and how we behave with each other in a virtual space when we have anonymity, I think that's important, and that's going to affect adoption. But I think we have to pop up to 80,000 feet and talk about the meta ethics of the metaverse, right? And what's the long game? And unfortunately, the way our governments are elected, which is in fairly short 2, 3, 4 year cycles, it's really hard for them to focus on the long game, because they're trying to focus on the next election. China has a 500-year plan. Think about that, a 500-year plan. My country's 250 years old. They have a 500-year plan. Like, we have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow in America. And so I think that those questions are important. I just don't know who asks this question to who cares enough to invest enough money, time, and resources to solve it when they're focused on the next election cycle.
Thank you. I think I love the discussion we are having right now. I think it's very important to have that discussion. I think we were thinking about what is the solution that we can propose, and it also poses the problem of our position in that mess, and with what it's our job, basically, to produce content for that technology. And I think in the end, the main problem is that all that is basically techniques of mental manipulation. It's that it's using the way the human brain works. And all studies have shown that those techniques of mental manipulation, they work. And it's practically impossible to be immune to that, because we are all human, our brains all work in the same way. And basically the only partial solution is to know about it. Like, it's the only way that you can be immune partially to a mental manipulation technique is to know about it.
Yeah. It's consciousness. Like, we have to become conscious, which is the reason I wanted to have this conversation in this room with this group, because I think you guys actually are the conscious community within our organization, within our industry, and can start having this conversation and make people aware. And that's why I was so in love with HTC's Vive Flow product, because here's a company that created a really lightweight, affordable, comfortable headset that's designed to help people become more mindful. Like, we need more of those products. And if they could afford to give them away, then we might impact enough people. But yeah.
I just want to say, for that reason also, some companies are not working for defense also, right? Yeah. I mean, it's the same conscious, so it's the same thing. Even there are millions to make revenue out of the defense market. Also, some companies have chosen not doing this, so yeah. It's a choice also.
I think that's an easy one to figure out. I think that you have...
That's more obvious.
It's more obvious, yeah, absolutely. It's more obvious, but...
Of course, your presentation helps also.
Yeah, hopefully. Thank you. Yeah.
Don't you think that governments will try at least and will succeed at fighting back at one point? Because there is a huge governance problem. For me, it's all about the governance. And since it's already interfering with the, with the statewide governance, then I guess there will be either political political uprising or civilian uprising.
Yeah, look, I think that this almost has to be a government intervention issue. I question their ability to get that far ahead of something. Like, this is really, like, this is an emerging tech conference. I don't know how many people, there's hundreds of people paying attention, and the government doesn't usually pay that close attention to emerging technology, is my concern.
But the military.
But the military, yeah.
So perhaps it will come from the military, which we've sidetracked for so long, but perhaps they will give, they will level it up.
So are you suggesting the army should take over Facebook?
No, they should counterattack. They should bring it down.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's more likely to be the European governments actually that intervene in this, and they're already looking at it, and I'm hopeful that at least they tackle the obvious problem, which is the social media stuff. Like, they're not going to tackle the metaverse stuff yet because it's not a thing. Like, the metaverse is just a buzzword still, right? And it's going to be a buzzword for the next it'll be a buzzword for the next year until the next buzzword comes on, and then you guys will all get busy building the metaverse, and all of a sudden someday everybody will wake up in the metaverse. That's how it happens. But hopefully the governments, they're already looking at the stuff that's happening on social media and how they're driving, suicide and depression and interfering with politics and elections and stuff. And so hopefully that will continue to get attention and they'll intervene there. Yeah.
Because there isn't a lobby. We're the lobby in a sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if we can be strong enough, then perhaps there will be some form of NRA. This is the worst lobby, but I mean, to be as strong as the NRA.
Yeah, and look, I would...
ethics.
Absolutely, I totally agree with that. And look, I think, I've toyed around with making, this into a documentary. I have no idea how to do it, but if anybody's interested, I know there's some filmmakers in here. If anybody's interested in talking about how to make this story a little bit bigger and get it out on Netflix so people can see it and we can get more attention, I'd be more than happy to work on that project with somebody. I have no idea what I'm doing though, so. Any other questions, comments, rants? Anything from the online audience? I don't know if we have a mechanism for that. I think there was a Hopin app. I probably should have had that open while I was doing this. I could have been watching. If anybody wants to log into the Hopin app and see if anybody has any questions out in the metaverse. Otherwise,
that's a very big hurdle. You need to take your attention from the stage.
I know.
Look into a smartphone, log in, find something.
And I want to do it because it's a distraction.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm having too much fun doing this. So, yeah, cool. I want to thank you all for coming. I don't want to come any longer between you and the first drink of the night. Thank you for your questions, your comments, and your attention. Thank you.